didn't see you come in there.
I just sneaked in.
You did.
Tippy toes.
Well, listen, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no problems.
I don't know if you've listened to any of our podcasts at all.
I've got them queued up ready. I've listened to one, choosing a driving instructor.
Okay. This week, having chatted to, I mean, I don't teach many learners anymore, but the few that I've got had tuned in and listened to that one.
All right. Cool.
Which I thought was really interesting because it's not aimed at these guys, but they gave back. It was interesting. And
you never know who's looking at the stuff that you do. I'm amazed that when we were releasing stuff at LDC, the breadth of people that are watching the thing, you know, right from instructor trainers right through to people who haven't even got the licenses yet. It's odd. It's funny how the YouTube algorithm puts stuff in front of the people. Back then, in the early days of doing that stuff, was anything that was proven popular was just thrown in front of everybody. Now it's a bit cuter the way it does things. Well, I don't think anybody really knows how it works.
I'm sure that technology listens to us because
I think this was the beginning of Terminator. YouTube, the algorithm there. It has its own rules.
You picked up on my message to you saying I want to find out if there's a robot underneath there.
If there's a robot, it probably wouldn't swear as much.
Yeah. I'm finding myself doing that more and more often. But no, you kind of started this podcast with probably not the best way in terms of you should always have a plan for things, right?
Allegedly.
Yeah, apparently. But I just wanted to talk to people, and there's so much noise around training, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what's good, what's not good. And I think I wanted to bring some realism back into this, that we are just people.
Yeah.
Right?
I always say to people, I'm just a job driving instructor. So it's just, and I have my ways of doing things. And I always try and put my stuff across like, look, this has worked for me. Try and see if it works for you. I'm not saying that I'm right and somebody else is wrong. There's a little bit too much of that around.
I think so.
And there's just because somebody has a different opinion or a different methodology to you doesn't make them the enemy. It just means they're different. And their methodology and their way of
device is offline. To connect, swipe down from the top of your screen. Then go to settings, network.
I'm so glad that happened to you, because every podcast or every recorded meeting I have with Becky, I'm not going to say her name, my one stops talking or turning lights on, turning lights off.
Yeah. Just turn that off.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, settings name, people who are listening to this podcast will suddenly find their device doing stuff.
Oh, that could be fun. Couldn't
it? Yeah, well, let's try that. Alexa, I see a little silhouette of a man all around the place.
Mine didn't pick up on it. I'll have a disco light in a minute.
Anyway, where were we?
I think we were just sort of settling in, really. I just want to say, Bob, if I'm probably sure, I'll be assuming here that you probably feel like you're quizzed quite a lot. What's the answer to this? How do I do that?
Yeah.
And I want you to feel today, if you want to spin it back and ask me something, then feel free. That's absolutely fine. Because I'll ask myself, do I know much about you? And I'd probably say no. I mean, I know of you. I used your content, your YouTube channel, a hell of a lot in my early days coming into the industry. I think I've told you this before. I didn't have much guidance. Didn't know I use the term loosely, what was right, what was wrong, how should it look. But I certainly use your content in that, well, I can't copy what you're doing because I've got a different person sat next to me.
Yeah.
They're not the same person you're with. But I was able to use your content in a way that, why is he asking those questions? What's he trying to achieve? So I found that, you're starting something at the moment, aren't you, this mentorship? But actually, I'm not sure if you're aware, maybe you are, but you were mentoring me.
Well, it's something, it's been fascinating, really, because it's something I hear a lot. Oh, you helped me when I was practicing for my part 2 and my part 3. You helped me when I was starting my business. You helped me when I had this happen, that happened. You think, we never really considered any of that. Those videos that were launched on LDC's YouTube channel, initially they were just a journey into coaching. We'd
To the marketing, maybe.
no, it was meant to be internal. It was never meant for public consumption at all.
Okay.
Because we read about coaching, that the MD at LDC was the driving force behind it, really. And the Hermes report had just been published. The high impact approach for enhancing road safety through more effective communication skills. And the DVSA were clearly interested in it. So we thought, well, we better find out what this is about. So we contacted the great and good of the coaching world and got some information about it and thought, well, how's that going to work in a safety critical environment? Because the coach, generally in coaching, the coach doesn't know anything about what they're coaching. They have no subject knowledge. So they just sit in the press, well, what's your goal? Where are you now? What's the best way of going about it? Can we break down into smaller goals? Blah, blah, blah. And the coachee does all the work. We're here, not only do we have all that subject knowledge, but we're in a safety critical environment. So if it goes pear-shaped and somebody dies, that's on us. So you think, how do we balance this? So we thought we'd try the pure coaching approach first, no instruction. And if you have a look at some of the early ones with Bobby Joe, you'll see me. I can look at that video. I can see what I'm wanting to instruct all the time. And I wasn't allowed.
Do you know what I liked about that, Bob?
Hmm?
Especially Bobby Joe. What I liked, and I can still remember them, and we're going back some years now, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, yeah.
I could see the cogs churning for you.
Yeah.
And you could see almost there was an element of, I want to say this or I want to do this because this is what I'm used to doing.
Right.
But actually it helped because it was real. It was, well, actually, what is Bob trying to achieve to help Bobby achieve what she wanted to do?
Well, I think it was almost pure luck that we started with that approach. Well, let's try no instruction first. If we started with something else, it might not have been as useful. Because if I'm totally and utterly honest, I looked upon this coaching as this is bullshit. This is just another fad, another bright idea from the DVSA or the DSA as it was then. They'll get sick and drop it, and they haven't. But anyway, so by doing that, I was amazed to find that the same level of learning was happening. In fact, it was maybe even she was gaining better understanding and a real good solid grasp of stuff by working it out for herself. And my stock approach was just when I wanted to instruct and I couldn't think of what to say, I'd just say, well, what do you think? And then she'd sit quiet for a while and come up with stuff. So it was that process that then made me realize that actually this does work. This is magic. And it speeds the process up ridiculously.
I agree. I think there's a separate debate on, is everybody coachable? Right?
Yes, they are.
And that's so your answer there is yes, they are. There is that debate. Is everybody coachable? So I guess I put it to you that what's missing, if somebody is arguing, maybe even internally with themselves, that they just can't coach this person, are we missing the mark on what coaching is?
Yeah, it's a great question. I used to get hit with this all the time when we were first making the changes. Before the test had come in, before the part 3 test had changed. And the argument always came back at me, well, I've got pupils you can't do that with. And I used to just say, well, yeah, I'm sure you have. Life conditions some people in such a way that they become uncoachable. I have a stock answer to that now. When somebody says to me, I've got pupils you can't do that with, I say, no, you've got pupils you can't do that with.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. So
and I firmly believe that now. Some people are a lot more difficult than others, and some people are conditioned by life in such a way that it takes a lot to have them lower the barriers to let you in. But that's part of the job of a coach. That's part of the contracting at the start. How's this going to work then? How are we going to work together? What do we do if this happens? What do we do if that happens? What do you need from me? This is what I need from you to make that work. But you have to earn that trust. So it takes a little time. And I look at the videos now and I can see that I've got much better on the latter videos at getting that trust straight away because of the conversations we had before, because of my way of being. They don't feel threatened. There is no risk to them dipping their toes in it while I think this water, because they know I'm not going to go, well, you're an idiot.
Absolutely.
It's the natural defense mechanisms that we have that prevent it happening, but everybody's coachable. Some are easier than others.
So are you saying that the better I get as a coach, mentor, trainer, that supportive role, as I get better,
Yes and no.
I'm able to coach on a more diverse playing field, different needs, because I think that there's lots of boxes that have been created to put people in.
Yeah.
And do I need to be a psychotherapist? Do I need to be X, Y, and Z to be able to support this person? And I guess, is it fair to say that there's some truth to that, which is why we have CPD, right? Which is why we go in and we learn other things.
This is a real tricky one. I would say no, because I don't like boxes. Once you put people in boxes, then we see it as, well, our job's done. And that's why they're difficult to teach, because they've got ADHD. That's why they're difficult to teach, because they're on the spectrum. They've got this or that or the other. And yes, they are issues.
The challenges, aren't they? So they've got a challenge. And if as a trainer you've not come across somebody with a certain need or way of doing something, or we haven't quite unlocked what it is.
What you need is expert guidance.
Absolutely.
You'll find it sat right next to you.
Yep. Yeah.
So I don't want boxes and stuff because they get in the way. I went through that phase, and what I look at now is people say to me, "Oh, I wish I was as good at you as coaching." But it's not that I'm good at coaching. I'm reasonably proficient. My learners are better at being coached because of the journey that we've gone on together and because of the agreement we have at the start. They're open to it, wide open to it, because each time they engage with it, their level of self-efficacy increases. Their belief in themselves, their belief in me, and their belief in the process is solidified, and it becomes dead easy. And then your batting average goes from 40 lessons to test to 20.
Absolutely. So would you say as we get better at talking, communicating, our job gets easier?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I would say as we get better at listening, and we're not good at listening, driving instructors. And
is that not part of communicating?
It is. But I don't see much evidence of that at the point yet.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Somebody once told me, in fact, probably a few people have told me over the years, that you've got two ears and one mouth. So listen twice as much. Yeah.
It's true. It's true, and it's the type of listening we do that's important. And it took me a while to buy into it, to actually believe it. Because to begin with, I thought, but I'm a really good instructor. My pupils, I've got a really high first-time pass rate, and I get a lot of recommendations. I'm clearly good at the job. And I found ways of working that help me to help a diverse range of people. But it's not until you switch to being a coach and that you get really proficient at that, you can really open people up and make the learning deep and strong and long-lasting. And that's the key thing. That's what we should all be aiming for. Is that we all talk about post-test. I hear loads of people talk about post-test, but I hear lots of people talk about a lot of stuff without evidence that they're actually doing it.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you ask a driving instructor what the golden rule is, they'll tell you, well, never drive so fast that you can't stop within the distance you can see to be clear. And I normally follow that up with, well, what does that mean?
That's interesting, because when you look at your Part 3, your standards check form, and there's lots of interesting words and things on there, isn't there?
Yeah.
What do they mean? What do they mean to you, right?
That's right.
How are you interpreting them? What does it look like in principle? And I think I've noticed working with trainee instructors, there's a black and white answer for this.
Yeah.
That's what's thought, at least. Yeah. And of course, those 17 competencies in that Part 3 could look 17 times different, couldn't they? in 17 different lessons. Yeah.
Probably 17 to the power of 17 in reality, but
yeah, right.
I like to think of it, and it's taken me a while to kind of distill it down to this. And the journey to distilling it down was started by thinking, well, what do the DVSA want? The man with a pen in his hand, or the woman with a pen in her hand, what are they looking for? And they want value for money, and they want safety critical issues addressed. They also want the client put at the center of that, so that they've finally understood that the client being at the center of the process means that they're coming up with their own solutions, which will therefore be permanent solutions that'll go post-test. So they need some kind of yardstick to measure that. So it's a very simple thing they're measuring. And they're just as they've always done, they're looking at the core competencies. Are you, as the professional driver trainer, coach, insert whatever label you want, are you able to look at what's going on, understand it, understand what might happen, understand what has just happened, and apply things to make sure that that doesn't happen again, helping the learner to come up with their own solutions. So are you seeing the problem? Are you bringing it to their attention? Are you having a conversation that helps them to see that that is something that needs fixing? Yeah, we do need to do that. And then coming up with a new plan. And that's it. So the 17 competencies are a yardstick to lay over the top of that and measure it. But it's that very simple thing that's being measured. Like, are you fixing shit? As simple as that.
Have you got any
critical stuff happen? Are you fixing it or not? And if you're not, well, you can bugger off because I'm not going to give you a green badge. It is that simple.
And do you think learners can be aware of this as well? Can't they? Because if they're not feeling like they're getting value, they're not learning something. Something's not being fixed. They're going to go elsewhere, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And again, of course, I've looked at lots of angles from this and I was fortunate enough to be in a job at LDC where I was paid to sit down and study this stuff and have a look and find, what is it they're looking for? How are we going to do that? How are we going to get this message across? How are we going to get our 500 instructors to believe, firstly, and then all of their pupils, and the 60 trainers that work with LDC? How are we going to get all of them to buy into this? So I started by analysing test data from all around the country. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests. Not only L tests, but the part 2 and the part 3. If people were failing, what was it that was causing it? Were there commonalities? Were the same box ticked? Or a low score in that box equates fail? And there is. Was the trainer aware of the surroundings and the pupil's actions? Was any intervention timely and appropriate? Was sufficient feedback given to help the pupil understand the safety critical incidents? And was the lesson plan adapted? Those 4 boxes impact on everything else, because that's what the DVSA are about. Now, yes, there's a whole world outside of that, the goals for driver education, blah, blah, but that's not what's being assessed on your part 3 or your standards check. So my data showed me that if they score well in those boxes, they always pass. If they score badly in those boxes, they always fail. No exceptions.
So are you saying that you found the goalposts?
Yeah, ish. Yeah, I found what the yardstick is. I found out what's really important to the DVSA.
I might need the southern translation to the yardstick.
the way that we are being measured, the core skills that they're looking for. They're looking, same as they do with the learner driver. They're asking themselves the question: am I happy to share the road with this learner? If so, yeah, I'll give you a full license. They're also asking, am I satisfied that this person will produce safe drivers? And if the answer is yes, you'll get your green badge. If the answer is no, you won't. You'll never get it if you're letting safety critical stuff slide. DVSA have always been about safety. That's why the test came in 1935, because too many people were dying. We then realised that there's people getting ready for tests, and some of them are getting lucky and passing. We need to have a look at the people that are training them. So the register was born. And now, of course, we're overlaying the stuff from the Hermes report that showed if the learners involved in the process, they're long-lasting solutions. So now that's been sort of overlaid over the top. But make no mistake, the DVSA still see core competencies as it was enough in the past for the candidate for test to say, oh, you're not checking your mirrors. That's not good enough. You can't do that because that's unsafe, because this could happen. So I'm going to remind you to do it next time. Check your mirror, check your mirror, check your mirror. Right, okay, you're doing that now. Now I'll just prompt you. What do you need to do here? No,
That's interesting, Bob. I'm sorry to interrupt you because that still happens a lot, right?
That's exactly what's being measured.
But that level of instruction, that telling, should we call it the old way, still happens a lot, right?
And there's a place for it.
Absolutely. But when we're looking at client-centered, drawing learning out, we're being the coach, we're encompassing everything around that individual. In terms of the training for instructors, is there pieces missing that we're not enabling or teaching or coaching the instructor to understand the thought process of that? Is it, I'm noticing, especially for myself, that there seems to be a lot of tick box exercises and this needs to be said this way and this needs to be done that way. But the understanding isn't there. So why is that not happening? And how do we change that? Because it's all it's a behavioral change, right?
Yeah. We're systemic instructors throughout the industry. And new people into the industry are being trained mostly by people who were raised in that fault-based world.
Okay.
I'm convinced that's why most driving instructors are negative about stuff. And that's the difference between a driver instructor and a battery. Battery's got a positive side. We're a very negative bunch. I'm sure it's because we were raised in this fault-based world. And if you ask anybody who's 16 and looking to get some driving lessons, what they think driving instruction is, the answer will be broadly similar. And I know that because I've conducted these surveys. They'll say, well, you sit next to a driving instructor and you make some mistakes and he fixes them and then you go for your test. Then you learn to drive.
Do you think that's come from parents that come from learning to drive?
No, the blame for that lies 100% at our door as an industry. We are to blame for this. We are not making the changes that are required. We pay lip service to it. We're not helped. The DVSA are doing their best to do it now, but when it first came in, they just said, just do what you'd always done, because they didn't know how to mark this exam either. Sure. And they kind of made it up as they went along, so you could go along and be total instruction, you'd still pass. Now you can't.
No,
so those goalposts are being changed. In their defence, they have let us know what they want. They have published a document.
So there was blurred lines for a period.
Yeah, and I think in some test centres there may still be blurred lines, because you may still have an examiner who doesn't believe in it. And we've got an industry that on the whole doesn't believe in it. And there's your problem. So that's what needs to change. People look at it and think exactly the same as I did when I first came across it. It's just hippy trippy bullshit.
I agree, Bob. I think you've got people in the industry that kind of, most people are, I'm not calling people stupid, but that get it and they go, right, and I understand I've got to do it this way. But if I'm not sold on it, it's not going to stay, is it? And of course, that's the same for our learners. If we're having a conversation, if it's not coming from them, and they're not sold on that idea,
right.
the chemicals aren't connecting, are they? They're not making the best soup, as I call it.
Yeah, we're getting better. We are. We're definitely getting better. And there's some great work done by a lot of people in the industry. Jen and Claire and the tri-coaching people. Really raise people's awareness of what it was and how important it was. Because I don't think you truly buy into it until you've experienced it. The magic of it happening and the learning just pouring from a learner next to you. Once you've experienced that, you think, well, I'll never instruct again. But it's a journey that we need to be on, and there has been no journey as such. We've not been led as an industry from point A to point B. We're left to find our own way, and the ones in the industry that are interested in CPD are finding their way along that. But there's people who haven't taken CPD. Now, that doesn't make them the Antichrist. They're just too bloody busy, so we have to get this message out, and I don't think, as an industry, and I don't think the DVSA, for their part, have made a very good job of this.
Is that because a lot of, I guess, the instructor training is unregulated? And if I get you thinking outside of the industry, and maybe you can tell me a little bit more about what you've done previously, but if we look at some teacher training qualifications in the further education sector,
yeah,
that there's a format, it's regulated,
Yep.
You're getting nationally recognised and worldwide recognised qualifications.
And you have to prove as a qualified teacher, you have to prove that you're doing CPD.
Absolutely,
And it has to be meaningful stuff.
Right. And if everybody in our industry was expected to take a form of course like that, and there's some good stuff in some of those courses, that is absolutely definitely that those skills can transfer and be used in our industry. Would that change anything?
It depends. It's, Chris Benson always bangs on about it. We'd find what the lowest standard was and just go for that. As an industry, we're not forward thinking. And again, I think it's because we've always done it this way. So why don't we just keep on doing it this way? We're very resistant to change, but that's a human thing as well. I wish I did know what the answer was. For me, if every ADI also did at least one of the modules from the award in education and training and one of the modules from the vocational assessment stuff, it would change the mindset big time. I learned a ton.
Have you ever tried it?
Oh, yeah. I'm a qualified internal verifier.
Sorry, Bob. What I meant is,
teacher.
Have you tried it with a trainee instructor?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah. So in terms of suggesting, do these couple of modules from the award of education and training, and what have you noticed about that?
Well, I don't necessarily direct them towards that, but I want to pique their curiosity. If you have a look on LDC's YouTube channel, there's some on my YouTube channel as well where I'm doing instructor training. You'll see it. I'm applying those things to them. They're experiencing this stuff without realizing they're experiencing this stuff. It's just part of their journey. And it's all about, a very different kind of questioning. I make the assumption before I start that the person next to me has everything they need already. And I'm just rearranging the dots inside their head because they've lived at least 17 years if they're a learner. If they're coming to become a trainer, well, they're at least 21, probably 30. They've got a lot of life experience, so I want to tap into that because they've got everything they need. It's like, if somebody's learning to drive, the skills that we need are spatial awareness and manual dexterity. And we learned that before we went to kindergarten or nursery or whatever you want to call it. And we're very good at it. There's all the experiences in life. So if we ask a different kind of question, a question that forces the search inwardly for them to seek out every experience they've ever had that's broadly similar, then we're in the money. But if you just say, well, what do you think? I don't know. What do you want to do today? I don't know.
And I think those points are great. But if I can bring you back to somebody having some insight into one of these nationally recognized qualifications, and you said that you're applying some of that, giving them some of that.
I'm not giving them anything. I'm helping them have some experiences. If I think, oh, well, you need to have this and you need to have that, I've just put a box around them. I'm very against that.
And so what I'm trying to get at is if we're looking at like a bottom line, you mentioned Chris Spencer, and there's a bottom line for this training. Is there, let's say for example, you had to do your award for education and training before you could do instructor training. Who's the decision maker? There isn't one, is there? Who says that that's what you've got to do? Is there a benefit to doing something like that?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because if you look at outside of our country for instructor training and that kind of stuff, it's a much more difficult task to become an instructor. But they get paid considerably more than we get paid. I think it's about really helping somebody to become the best version of themselves that's possible to be. And getting them to the point where they're not only proficient, but it's enriching their lives and the people around them. Grand ideals here. So I use a kind of questioning that's different. I constantly, and you'll be the same. You sit in the back of cars and you just think, you're just seeing if that person knows what you know. What do you learn from that? And I always say to my trainees, what have you learned from your question? Have you learned some stuff? Not really. It wasn't a very good question then, was it? So my questions are about how are you deciding what speed to travel at, how much room to leave, whether to go or not, what distance to be behind this car, how much room to leave the cyclist, whether the pedestrian's stepping out or not. How are you deciding? Or we'll say, okay, we're in a national speed. We're doing 40 here. Now, do you think that's the right speed? Why? What are you basing that on? So I want to drill into that knowledge base there. What's called, well, as you know, the map of the world.
Absolutely,
how
yeah.
their dots are joined up. And their dots are joined up very differently to mine. So I can't use my map of the world to help them discover stuff in their map of the world because their connections are different.
Absolutely. It's interesting that there's so much, when I say resistance to this, I don't think it's conscious resistance. It's just so unusual to the norm, isn't it?
Fear of change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can look at parenting, couldn't you, in that respect of, don't do that because this will happen and this happened to me. But they're not you. They haven't been on the planet for 40 years. And,
right.
Why are they making those decisions? What are they basing it on? What experiences have they got? And I think it's super fascinating. When you do ask these questions, what people come out with sometimes, I used to think I knew it all. I used to
see that coming.
Absolutely. And I used to think, I know it all. I've seen it all. No, I haven't.
No,
I haven't. And I still, every week, the things will come out and I'm like, wow, that was really interesting.
It's like like identical twins can live almost an identical life and yet still have a view from a slightly different angle because the connections inside the neural pathways are joined up just slightly differently. And it's a fascinating area, as you quite rightly say. And it's once you start delving into that, the sort of learning that happens is frighteningly fast and very deep.
My twins, they're not identical. Chalk and cheese. Completely different. Think completely different. One of them that talks and I think, wow. But still just as interesting, and there's nothing wrong with that. Bob, should we pull out of it seemed to get a little bit deep on
That's fine. I could talk about it all day. It's a fascinating subject. But your audience might not want to listen to it all day.
So I love it as well, and people may call me sad, but I just find humans fascinating, the way we think, how we come to make decisions.
Amazing things. Yeah. They're amazing. Now, we're talking about this a little while ago. I said, we got to the moon, and somebody said, well, that might have been a hoax. Sorry, then let's assume it was a hoax. We were clever enough to hoax people into thinking we did it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Human beings are amazing things. Amazing things.
And that comes from experience, hearsay, other people's opinions, herd mentality, and all of this other stuff, doesn't it? It is fascinating. And it's nice to be a part of that change as well, making a difference. The change inside the car, whether it's with a learner or whether it's with a trainee instructor.
Well, we're definitely on the path as an industry, but we're moving slow. We really could do with moving quicker. But we have so many things to contend with at the minute. We're in disarray a little bit. We're not being helped by the current issues the DVSA are having. But I think we're seeing the obstacles and taking our eye off the goal.
My opinion, there's too much, not divide, I think that's the wrong word. There's, the DVSA doing what they do, the testing, and then the trainers, and there's no bottom line, there's no decision maker in that, and it's led by people like yourself in the field that can sell an idea based on statistic, facts, experience, science, whatever we want to call it, and then, like you said, being on board with it and seeing the results.
Well, I think we're quite well served in as much as the examiners at the DV, the enforcement team, they've now seen what good coaching looks like. They've experienced it. Right.
They're on board.
Now, maybe the Hermes project is making more sense to people who it didn't make sense of before, but who were scared to put their hand up and go, I don't understand what that means. Now they're seeing, I remember ages ago having a conversation with an examiner, and he said to me, when we pulled over to talk about the issues there, he said, you were trying to get her to work it out for herself. That's correct. Stuff that's what do you mean? He said, well, people can't do that. So I don't know, let me just stop you. Did she work it out for herself? And he went, well, yeah, but that's not the point.
Because you only teach geniuses, Bob.
Just listen to what you've just said to me. I was trying to get her to work it out for herself, and you don't think that can happen, and yet you admit that it did. And he stopped and was like, "Oh yeah, I suppose you're right. I didn't waste any time, did I?" Like, no, well, that's what coaching's about. So he clearly wasn't a convert. It will be now, I imagine. That's a long time ago. So as we get more and more people through that are coaching, and the DVSS see it work really well, it won't do us any harm, I don't think.
I think you're right. You mentioned there about experience and the examiners gaining experience and seeing, well, my very first test being conducted in this new style, if you like.
That's right.
That was all right. I'm not really sure if it's the right thing to do. Now I've seen the second one. Well, actually, that seemed to work a lot better than the first one. So that's now my new criteria. And now my third one, well, that one didn't kind of work. So I think there's definitely an element of learning as they go there.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because it's got to start somewhere, hasn't it?
Yeah.
All right, Bob. Let's come out of the debate there on. I don't even know if it's a debate. Our thoughts on the testing for parts 2 and 3. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?